Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys.
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys.
In this episode of the Software People Stories, I, Chitra, am in conversation with Hima Patel, Research Manager at IBM Research Labs. Hima shares several interesting stories in the world of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science, from where it began with a book for her to creating mood enhancers with like minded friends to experiences across companies like GE Research and Shell to help solve business problems between data scientists and domain experts, managing turbines, assessing credit rating, and physicians. She also shares a message for young aspirants. Listen on. Hi, Hima. A very warm welcome to you to the Software People Stories podcast. I now hand over the mic to you so that we can hear your introduction.
I work currently with IBM Research. My current role is that of a research manager. I lead a group of 12 researchers. We work in the space of AI, machine learning, natural language processing, right? And one of the strong things that I have carried with me as a researcher throughout my career is I've been very passionate about, working in areas or doing research in areas wherein, I can really go and impact the business products or the business that that the company is working for, or the related business for that company. So that's a short introduction about me.
Thanks, Hima. How did this journey into the space of artificial intelligence and data analytics begin? Where did it all start?
So it's a very interesting story, right? And maybe and a good one which I like to recall because this is also very close to my heart, right? I was doing my bachelor's of engineering in computer science, and this was roughly in our third year, where everybody starts thinking that hey, what are the kind of jobs that are available in the market, and what are the kind of really hard technologies around which the jobs are aligned, and all of this, right? And I was also part of some of these conversations. But I always was also very as fairly good at my grades and so on. But I was also a curious type of a person, right? I would sit in the lab for hours and hours, try to get something working, and I've done my share of those kind of experiments as well, right? So for me, the whole journey for artificial intelligence, it began when I had a professor in my college, Professor Gosavi, and he used to teach us a course that was electromagnetics. So slightly different, but uh, you know. I once went to him, to talk something about electromagnetics, and his office was full of books, at all places, and ideas that were going on in his head, and like it was it was a very interesting space, right? His office. And I went and I spoke to him about whatever I had to speak about electromagnetics, and then he said, you know what, he handed me this book which was Introduction to Artificial Neural Networks, and he said, maybe you should read this, I think you'll like it. And then I said, okay, so I really had no idea what it was, but I said, okay, cool, let me read this, right? And I had a good friend, somebody like me who would, like to think a little bit, of like wild ideas or wacky ideas of what all can we do, and things like that. This is really just, thought discussions. But I had a good friend, and I said, I went to him and said, hey, I got this book, and Professor Gosavi thinks that I should read it, and it just happened that I think we both got into that journey of reading about artificial neural networks, and how it was inspired, from the biological, human brain, and which was still a far connection, but the motivation was very strong. And then the whole idea of making something intelligent, right? I think that was like a spark. Like, I mean, it I just felt like, oh my god, now I have wings, right? Like everything that I can see around me, I was thinking, how can I make this intelligent, right? And then it took time to read through the math of it and understand it a little bit. And then we were still still understanding. We really didn't know what sort of a use case will apply to, because we really did not have all the necessary skills. We were just learning, and we would think that, hey, at a high level, hey, can I make my washing machines intelligent, right? And that would be there, and we would like think like, hey, it was so cool, if your washing machines can decide, how much it needs, how much dirt is there, and how can it decide those things intelligently. So we were at that level, but we didn't really know how we would implement things like this. But these were like really, let's say wish ideas, right? Like, how nice, if we could do something like that, right? And we were in that stage. And then we had the semester break, and we, went back to our houses, etc. And there was this one evening where I was sort of alone at home. I was just sitting, at my desk, thinking something, reading, actually studying for the exams, thinking something, and there's nobody else in the house, and so it was getting a little bit dark, etc. And I was thinking that, what, if you're alone at home and if you're feeling sad, or something like that, or if you're coming from outside and if you're having a tough day, and if there's nobody at home with you, right, who can help you cheer up your mood, or what can you do, or can intelligence do something here? And that was the genesis. And I called up my friend and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do something like that? I come home after a tired day at work, and then can the ambience of my house change based on if I'm like in a happy mood, right? I'm smiling, can I, maybe like some cool lively music starts playing up. Or if I'm feeling a little tired or a little down, and maybe soft lights or whatever. And this could really be customized based on what works for every person. But I think so we were at that level, and then we thought that, okay, this sounds good, let's convert this into our final year project, right? And then we said, and that's where we said that, okay, we will try to build a system like this for our final year project. And I can say this openly now, that we were really very naive to say we can find out the human mood, which by itself, now I understand that it's a much much more complex thing. But basically, I think at that time when we said mood, we basically meant the facial expressions. And then we realized, okay, so there was this whole field of work called image processing. So we basically took extra courses. We were spending our own time in the library reading up on image processing, trying to understand, and then, okay, we got some ideas that, hey, we will build, try to analyze images and, partition an image into happy, sad, or a normal face kind of thing, right? And then we thought, okay, so where will we get these faces, right? I mean, where will we get these images? And we really went around and asked our friends, can you please help us? We really need to get started on this. So we had our friends helping us out. We were taking pictures of our friends, and we were asking them to give different expressions. And people were very very nice. People were giving us all these wide range of expressions, and so that's how we basically created our first data set. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun because we were looking at images of our friends. We were, these were people whom we liked, whom we used to hang around with. So this never felt like work, because even though we were like really toiling, really spending long hours in the lab at a stretch, but it never just felt like it, right? And the other joy with this whole thing of image processing was that you write a piece of code and you can see it on the image change, right? So we were trying to do something to the face and it would show up on the image, and that was like, wow, I do something and I can see the instant result of it. So that was like, a very big factor of, excitement to say. So this whole project, and then I think then we learned a little bit. Then we said, okay, we there are actually, data sets that people have spent time collecting, making proper professional data sets. So we moved on to those, and this was really our final year project. And then that's what really got me going into this whole field of machine learning, and it gave me the confidence that, of all the wacky things that we were thinking about, turning everything around, us intelligent. Now here was one place where we've really gone deep, and it got the confidence that, yeah, this is doable, right? This is not just, wacky ideas that we are writing in our notebooks. And also I think it, somewhere in my head, it just gave me a, I was for some reason very, very sure that this is the place where I want to, this is the area of work where I want to build a career. I had no idea how it would be done. I had no idea where I will get a job. I had no idea how I'll make a living. I think those things were just not coming into my head. I think I was just thinking that, oh, this is great. I like doing this. I'm having so much fun. I want to do this the rest of my life. Long answer to a short question, but this is how it all started, Chitra.
That's a fascinating wild ride, Hiba. Thanks so much for walking me through your dreams. Actually, trying to figure out a way to make it all work. And you've had so much fun along the way. Amazing, simply amazing. So thanks so much. You spoke a bit about software, writing software, and while you were taking all those pictures and to make your program work or to bring your idea to life. So
Yeah.
I have a question in my mind. How
Mhm.
do research and software sort of complement each other?
I think they're like, they're really partners in crime, right? You really cannot do very good research if you don't have good software skills. And let me explain by that what I mean, right? Right from the days when we were, when I was in college to the time I worked as a researcher in various labs, even to my current role where now I'm leading a team. One thing that the general rule, right, for doing research is to say, hey, you have an idea, you want to first try it out as soon as possible, because in your head, even though you've really thought through all of it, it may just not work, right? So having good software skills or good skills to quickly convert your idea and test it out is extremely essential, because a lot of times researchers are on this thought process, right? So I try this out, it doesn't work, okay, and then I'm continuing on the thought process, and then and adding to the idea or modifying the idea, and that's how that whole cycle works, right? And if you don't have good skills in the space to implement your ideas, then you lose that thought process, right? For instance, we try something, and then let's say there are you cannot make progress on the software side for a week, and then and then the thought process, I think, breaks down. So that's one thing. And also you are delayed, right? You cannot make, so there is this difference, right, between invention and innovation, right? And innovation is to say, I had an idea, I tried it out, I'm going to implement, put it into practice, and actually getting it work, right? So the whole journey from getting an idea to getting something working is really a journey. It's never a one step process. Hardly, there are situations where you said, hey, this is an idea, and, it just solves your problem. It almost never does. But the whole point is to, get an idea, make some progress, understand, see why it did not work, add on to your idea, modify the idea, brainstorm with some other colleagues and so on. But to do all of that, having good software skills, having good implementation skills is a must, because without which you'll feel stranded. You won't be able to make progress, at least in the research of computer science space. This is not true for research across all fields of work, but very true for at least this whole space of artificial intelligence or any kind of computer science research, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, given the fact that, the basis of a lot of artificial intelligence stems from data and one's ability to analyze it or at least see what the data has. And given
Right,
the reams of data and heterogeneous data that's coming in from all directions today, I think your
right.
point is very fair that one needs to have at least some idea about how to process that data so it begins to make sense, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Even to understand what's there in the data, right? Which we call as exploratory data analysis. Let us say we get a data set and we say that, hey, I think we want to do a classification kind of a task on this data set, but do I understand what are the challenges with this data set, right? So to even do this basic exploration of what my data looks like, where do I have noise in the data, where do I have where is my data less, do I have what do I need to do to my data so that my classifier will learn it well, right? So all of that does require definite strong implementation skills.
One thought that's coming to my mind, for a very long time, data was sort of analyzed in isolation. I mean, every company was doing its own analysis because they were
Mm-hmm.
capturing data for their own purposes. But when you look at the larger scheme of things, right, do you at some point in time see data being federated? I know it's happening in bits and pieces, it's beginning to happen. But where is this whole collaboration or federation of data headed towards? What can it do? What can it potentially do?
So let me give you an example, right? Data in silos and federated data, right? Where data from different parts of the company is brought together, using either via data lakes, or somebody might just do it via, just building a data mart, that is, or a data warehouse that, they care about, right? I think it is, there is a lot of value in putting all the data that you have together, because then you are getting many different perspectives about the process that was used to generate the data, which basically means that these are different processes in different parts of the company. Now we are bringing them together, right? So the value of the insights that you can bring out of that data is much higher than you would have looked at data in isolation.
So, how, in your experience, has all of this come together, Hima?
Right. So let me give an example, right? So in one of my engagements, I can actually think of two examples where we brought in data from different sources. Right. In one of the engagements, this was really data which was stored in tables, and this was data coming out of for a specific process where which said that, hey, so many transactions were done for a given company, or so many transactions were done for a given type of a product, etc. Now the point was that all the data was stored differently. So the data for products was stored differently, data for customers was stored differently, data for of how the transaction took place was stored differently. And if you want to look at all of them together and say that for a given store, what were where were my high points in the sales, where were my low points, this kind of data was very useful. So Chitra, I'm going to take a different shot at this, because I cannot obviously talk about specifics of the first use case. It might seem very general, right? So I'm just going to take a different use case. But okay, so here's an example. During my tenure at Shell, I was working with Shell Research, and I was looking at data which is captured from equipments. So these are rotating equipments which are of the likes of turbines and compressors, etc. Let's assume that so where does the data come from for an equipment? So there are a large number of sensors which are placed on these equipments to measure a large amount variety of measures for a given equipment, right? That could range from vibrations to like vibration in the x direction, vibration in the y direction, speed. So there are some measures which are related to the health of the equipment. There are some measures which are related to how well is the equipment functioning, for the job it's supposed to do, etc., etc. Right now, and this is for one given equipment. Now, each given equipment has a bunch of subsystems into it, and each subsystem has a bunch of sensors associated with it. Just for the sake of the example, let us say if these data with each subsystem is stored differently, right? Then you just get a sense of that subsystem. But when we were looking into this, when I was doing some kind of analysis on this, I was doing a project where we are trying to say, can I find anomalies in this data, right? And then for an anomaly to be detected and to make a claim that there is really something wrong with this equipment, one really has to look through data for all the subsystems and say, I think maybe this is this part of this sensor from subsystem A is going wild, which is affecting perhaps a different sensor, which is perhaps affecting a different part of the equipment, which is reflected in the sensor readings, and that's how that now there is some understanding of what's really happening with the equipment, right? And I'll tell you why this whole thing with is important, because these are equipments which stopping this equipment basically has a large cost to the plant where the equipment is installed, which means having a false positive of saying that, hey, we think there's something wrong with the equipment, but if there's really nothing wrong, then I think that's a huge cost to the company. So that's not a mistake that you can afford to make. But you also want to find these problems well ahead of time so that the equipment doesn't completely shut off, right? So you want to detect the problems as they are occurring, so that maintenance for it can be planned, or a variety of things can be done if you know that, hey, this equipment is going to die down in another 5 days, but you need to know that with certainty, right? And how do you know this with certainty, right? So engineers who work with this equipment day in and day out, they really understand the workings of this whole equipment, and they would say, hey, I know because there might be some jam in the lube oil place, and which is why I think the pressure is not getting relieved properly, and maybe this is why this equipment is in trouble, right? So that is how they would look at all of this. But obviously there were like thousands and thousands of equipment, so each engineer just doesn't have the bandwidth to look at it properly, right? But the whole point being of we were looking at data from the subsystems, and we were able to then explain to the engineer and say that explain in an analytics fashion that I think there's a problem with this equipment, and I think there's a problem because this sensors they're not behaving the way they are supposed to behave, right? And an engineer can look at that, and he would really know in his head that, oh yeah, that's right, I know this problem, this can be related to this problem. And maybe this is a little bit of oversimplification of what the actual process is, but I'm just trying to give an example that in this scenario we were really pulling up data from different subsystems to add together, because the equipment as a whole is one entity, and you want to detect something about this equipment as a whole, right? And this could be this could be generalized across to different things. For example, you could let us say in an organization, if you are collecting data, let us say a simple example, right? Should I give loan to this person or not? And that decision is made on 10 different factors, right? What was the credit history, etc., right? Things like that. Now each of these factors, right? So what is the credit history, what is this person's salary, what is this person's what is the family thing, how much money do they have in various forms, or how much assets do they really have. All of these kind of these are the some example factors that could be used to make a decision like this. And if you think about it, all of these kind of factors are captured really by different processes, right? So the salary is captured really from a different process. What is the credit history is captured from a completely different process in the firm, right? And if only if you can bring all of this together, you really have the holistic information about this individual. And if you have holistic information, the more the information you have, the more well formed decisions a machine or an AI system can make, right? So does that answer your question, Chitra?
Yes, it certainly does. In fact, when you were describing this whole thing, I was just thinking it's so much like our human bodies. We are a system, and then there are
Yes,
subsystems, and then there are subsystems. And
yes,
we have diagnostics and procedures that perhaps are looking at one system in isolation. And then it's almost like, you zoom in and then you zoom out. There's data helping you all along the way to either take the right decisions or, prescribe the right kind of treatment. Very nice, Hima. Very nicely put. So one question
thank
that's
you.
coming to my mind is, and when you talked about translating the language of data to help
Hmm.
engineers in the example that you described,
Yes.
how does that pose a challenge to, let's say, data scientists or researchers? And this could probably stem from my assumption that a lot of the data scientists and researchers look at data and interpret it in that language, in their language, whereas people on the ground who can make use of these insights or benefit from them need to know those insights in a way that they can assimilate it. How do
Yes.
you take up that challenge and how do you solve this kind of a problem?
Right. So, the answer to this question, Chitra, is that a data scientist has to work hand in hand with a domain expert, right? There's really no two ways about it, because a data scientist, without understanding the broader picture, without understanding the business goals, cannot really, give the value that a domain expert would look for, right? And a domain expert, without sharing his understanding of, so there are lots of tips and bits that a domain expert can help a data scientist and say, hey, even though maybe sensors data from these two sensors almost always go together, but really in the physical world there's no meaning to it, so you shouldn't really look more into it, right? You should not overemphasize that behavior that you see in the data. So these kind of insights that are the ones that the domain experts can give, right? And again, to your point, right, for the domain expert to be able to use the models well, the data scientist, one has to build a model in a way that really solves the business problem. So that's one. And the second thing is this has been more and more growing trend, where we are saying that, so there is a concept called explainability of machine learning models, right? Of why we are saying, of a decision that, or if a classifier is making a decision for you, or it's suggesting a decision that maybe, in this scenario you should do this, then what are certain things in the data that the classifier sees, based on which it wants to make that decision. And having it open with the domain expert has several advantages, right? I think it builds the domain experts trust onto the system, right? Because like I said, right, sometimes the cost of going wrong is very, very high. So in the end, for the system, the kind of system that I talked about, for to say that, hey, there's something really going wrong with this equipment, we should investigate that. To investigate that would mean that equipment has to be brought down for a certain hours, or something has to be planned in the maintenance window, or whatever is the best that can be done, which basically needs that a domain expert who's on the field has to sign off on it and say, hey, I agree, I think we should investigate that, right? And for that to happen, that domain expert really needs to have a lot of trust on your system. And that trust can come only, when, either historically, they've really used your model for a long time and they know that, it almost never goes wrong. So that's one kind of a trust, where, you do a lot of validations and you gain trust of the domain expert. And the other way of getting trust is to say, hey, I'll try to explain, some of the decisions that the model is making, which gives more holistic information to the domain expert, and say, I see, you are saying that it should be stopped, but, this is really a small problem. From my experience as a domain expert, I can say that, machines can live with problems like this for years and years without causing too much wear and tear. So I'm going to take a decision that maybe I don't need to stop the equipment at this point of time, right? So this is really a hand in hand story, right? I think a data scientist cannot work in isolation without understanding the bigger picture. And to put, to give you some more examples of what we mean by this, right? I want to take example of when, so I spent a lot of years at G, and many of my years were within G Research. And when we were working at G Research, we had a very experienced radiologist who would come to our lab, once a week, and we would really sit with him and say, this is how we are thinking about solving the problem, and what's your thought? We would really bounce off ideas of him, or he would say, yeah, perhaps, you could take advantage of this kind of facts about the human body, right. So I think the whole point that we had an experienced radiologist spending one full day with us every week by itself is I think brings the point that the a domain expert's view in building a system or working hand in hand with data scientists is extremely important, right? And to add on to that, right, for example, when I was working at Shell Research on this whole equipment, I think the whole thing was hand in hand, with working very closely with rotating equipment engineers who would, where I would say, hey, here is what I think is happening in the data, and they would try to explain to me from a machine perspective, and say that, oh, but these are kind of things that we really don't care about. So maybe perhaps you could use this cues that we already know about the machine, so that such alarms will not be raised, right? In all my engagements or in all my projects that I've worked with, we have had a very close collaboration with domain experts, while we are building any kind of systems.
Very nice examples, Hima. This relates to, how one can truly solve problems where it's really going to benefit somebody. So this is almost directly working with customers in some sense.
Yes, it is. You can say that, right?
So I have a question on a totally different topic now. And I know that you are now a research manager and you're
Mm-hmm.
leading a team of people. So
Yes.
what is it that you do as a research manager? And how do you keep your team focused or motivated with respect to whatever it is that you're researching?
So that's a very interesting question, Chitra, and also I think very pertinent with respect to research, because often you are in situations where you want to try out something, and things may not work out. So it can cause in some kind of frustration sometimes in team members, that hey, maybe we're just on a completely off path, right? The second kind of challenge that really happens within research is typically, we're working with, or trying to develop something to say, help a business product, or at least that's the long-term vision, right? And sometimes, people really spend, a large amount of time trying to work on something, put in a lot of hard work, can actually get something to work, but by the time we are done with that, the business priority has changed, and then it's no longer really important to us, really important to the business, which means great technical work done, but we didn't see a real world impact out of it, right? So I think these are, I think, two challenges that I think any research manager faces. and keeping your team motivated out of it is definitely it's definitely an interesting problem, right? If I have to look at it from the lens of a researcher. Couple of things that I think that I've seen other people do well. Some of the things that I try to do well is one is to say that I get at least make or try to bring in diverse set of people together, right? Or people who I think can bring in different viewpoints, which I think works well because at any point of time, if it feels like there is some kind of stagnation that's happening in the project, or people feel stuck, then there's if you really have a diverse team or people from different backgrounds, or diversity could mean anything here, it really helps because a lot of research work could just be where somebody just throws up a line and say, hey, how about we try something like this, right? And we just need that one person to say a high level idea of how about we try something like this, because more often than not, the others in the team can say, okay, maybe this makes sense. Perhaps, how about, adding this to this, right? Or maybe this is how we can, actually implement this, right? And that starts the whole, string of conversations, which can lead to several directions, right? So that I think is one thing, and in general, I think very important for researchers to talk to each other, bounce off ideas, and get inputs from their colleagues. The other thing is where I try to tell my team members also try to see whatever we can do at a management level, but try to tell team members that it's very very important to be focused on the technical problem that we are solving, and if not today, business priorities, things that are really not in your control, I think you shouldn't worry about it too much. But whatever is in your control, I think you should try to do the best job of it and not to give up, right? Which means that things turn around in a tide, right? So if there's good solid technical work that's done, maybe in a slightly different way of positioning it, maybe in a slightly different way of thinking about it, or maybe within 6 months, again the business priorities change, so it will find its way into real world impact. It may not happen instantly, but having that patience pays off. So that's my 2 cents about some of these challenges that I think are maybe a little bit unique to the research world.
I was almost thinking that, maybe you'll land up developing a mood enhancer for your team. What say?
No, I think I have some gray hairs now, so I can say that I've while that whole idea was very good at the start, I know we were very naive at that point of time, but yeah, a good thought.
Who knows? Some of the craziest researchers have had lots of gray hair and even wilder dreams. So you never know.
Yes, we should always keep the possibilities open. Yes.
I have so many questions to ask you. I am sure we will have many more conversations, and I hope many more podcasts. What is one message that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
One thing that's really helped me throughout my career was really just believe in yourself, right? And if you believe in yourself, then things have a way of figuring out automatically. And it seems like a little bit, it does seem like, it seems like at a very high level, but I genuinely believe in this, right? One is to stick to your passion, and you should have fun in doing what you're doing, because we spend, a large amount of time at our workplaces. So if you're having fun, the work that you're doing, you're basically just really enjoying your life all the time, right? So that's one. And second is have this, believe in yourself and don't give up. uh, if you don't give up, yeah, I think your mind has a way of figuring out things, giving ideas of how you can proceed further in that direction, and it almost and it works out. But you should have that belief in yourself, like pure 100% belief, right? Without having like a doubt. Oh, so no star, no conditions applied. Pure belief in yourself, and I think your mind figures out ways of how to how to achieve, whatever you've been thinking around, right? So I'll give an example around this. I finished my bachelor's. At that time, we had campus placements, and most of the jobs were software companies, right? And then at that time, I thought, no, I need to study about this whole artificial intelligence thing a little bit more. So I took up my, master's course. And when I finished my master's course, I worked in this area for 2 years. And again, I think I had about 2 to 3 software jobs, and but they were really not in the field of artificial intelligence. And in my head, it just felt that, yeah, this is all great, but this is not what I want to do. So, I just kept on looking, and then through a very, via mail, I got to hear about this small startup in Bangalore, who was hiring interns at that time, right? And I thought, okay, cool, let me just apply, let me see what happens, right? And they took an interview, and I really liked that whole interview because they asked me really good technical questions in the area that I was really passionate about. And then I got the internship, and now I'm in the situation with job offers versus an internship, big difference in the pay scale, no stability, etc. Right? And you can imagine the kind of conversations I was having with people around me, and where I'm thinking that, maybe I should take up this internship, and everybody else is saying, really, what's wrong with you? Right? This is not a stable thing. What will you do after the internship? What if they don't convert you? Those kind of questions. And I don't know. I'm thinking that, I don't know. We'll figure out something, right? And this is not one of those, fairy tale stories where, I join this place and, I get converted into an employee. I join this place, I work here, I make a good rapport with the folks in the startup, and they have, some kind of a hiring freeze, right? So they really cannot hire me. And the manager at that point of time tells me that, hey, if you are willing to wait for 6 months, I can hire you in another 6 months. And I'm like, I'm thinking I can't really, sit idle in the house for 6 months. So I was really on the road at some point of time. And I took up a different job with a different startup, which is doing really fabulous work, fantastic people. I was really in awe of my manager at that startup. I learned a lot of things from him, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, right? So after, I used to have this feeling every day, this is cool, but this is not what I wanted to do, right? And this keeps on going on in my head, and I'm talking to a few friends, and somewhere via the network, somebody tells me, there's a job opening in G Healthcare, which is who's looking for people in image processing, machine learning skills. I had no idea a company like G was doing anything in that space, right? And then, I apply, I get the job, right? The minute I hear about it, I had made up my mind, whatsoever happens, I really have to get this job. And I get the job. And from there, I've figured out, how to make my journey in this space, right? So not to brag, but I genuinely very strongly feel that, if you stick to your passion, if you don't give up, then I think, life has a way about, or your mind has a way of, giving directions and opportunities, or telling you how to make opportunities, which can eventually lead to what you really want, right? And in the midst of all of this that I told you, there like, there's several other things that I was trying to do at that time which did not work out. So which is where I go back to the whole point of, not to give up, not to lose hope, because apart from, before receiving the G healthcare job interview, there were many other things that I really tried doing, and obviously none of them worked, but I think, you learn a little bit from everything, and then I think if you keep at it, I think eventually there comes a place where, things just, the stars align and things just work out.
I think that's a fabulous message, especially for youngsters, Hima. Thank you so much. That was so meaningful and so practical. And again, yet another wonderful story to wind up this podcast with. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chitra. Thank you for having me as a guest on your podcast. I've had a very great time, very good time talking to you. Also reminding myself of some of the things, which I have forgotten. Perhaps this is I'm telling these things to myself of, shake off the rusty bits and remember, what you were doing earlier and, try to bring it back into your life again.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Hima.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chitra.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate this show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.